Hello and welcome to part 4 of the tutorial series How to make a sandbox visual novel in visual novel machinery. In this video we'll be looking into image choices and scene backgrounds. This guide will focus on how to do specific things in visual novel machinery, not on how to write a perfect story for Sandbox. So, let's get started. Last time we left off with our scene 1 and scene 2 and we have created some input from the player and saved it into our character. So next thing we want to do for a sandbox game is we want to be able to navigate a city, for example, a city map, so that you can go from home to brunch in the cafe, or go to the gym, go to work, go to college, whatever the player's heart desires, or the main character's heart desires actually. But before we can do that, let's repeat something from the last tutorial again. In this case, how to set memories, because one thing that's kind of important when you want to make a game about playing in the town is you have to name the town. So let's also quickly do that as well. For this purpose, we'll just copy these two nodes and we will add them here, and we will ask the player, what is the name of the town I am living in? Question mark. Alright, then we get the player input. And then, if we remember from last lesson, we want to create a memory for that to save it for later. In our case, I'll just save it to a dialogue. In this case, scene 1. So we will add we'll just reduce this memory and rename it to town name. And change it to a string. Save. And then what we can do again is memory set, get our scene, get the town name, and save the town name. Alright, next step is we connect this up, and actually before that, let's add one more node. So after we've set the town name, now we want Bob to tell the player that he now wants to go home. So in this case, what we're gonna do is we let him say, now, awesome, now let's go home. And then we move on to scene 2. In our scene 2, we will now give the player the option to go to different locations. So first, let's remove this. Then let's add a text called saying Bob wants to say, where should I go? It's what the reason why I would write it in this way is because you might want to have this scene not called scene 2 in the later down the line, but instead be called d_town map. The reason for that is because you will most likely always come back to the scene, and therefore then do let the player decide where they want to go and display and hide locations depending on certain conditions. For example, if it's the first time the player has to go home, which this case would be, for example, you only want to show home. Or for example, you want the player to get up in the morning at home, then leave home, and then you want them to allow them to go to work, and work is only available at a specific time, for example. So that's why I keep it this way. What we could do is we could add a branch before to say if first time, for example, then do something different, otherwise don't. But for now, let's just keep it this way for simplicity. And now the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna add a choice. So the choices that we have is we either can go home, we can go to a cafe, we can go to a shop, we can go to work, or maybe we go to college. Now, we need an answer for every single option here, so he's gonna say, okay, let's go home. And let's connect this up here. And then let's connect this. One thing to remember here is, because I have not mentioned it before, is a dialogue does not have to have only one dialogue end. It can have multiple dialogue ends, and they can do different things. For example, this one goes to scene 1, this one goes to scene 2, this one will go to scene 3, and so on. In this case, we would have this one goes to scene home, this one goes to scene cafe, this one would go to scene shop, this one would go to scene work, and this one would go to scene college. Now let's just finish this all up. So let's go home, is good. Let's go to the cafe. Let's go shopping. Let's go to work. And let's go to college. All right, let's save that. And now if we start the game, as we remember from last time, we can rename Bob to Max. My new name is Max. How old am I? He is 23 years old. And what's the town that he's living in? And the name is obviously Towny Town. Awesome, and now let's go home. Now, what we would expect now is a map displayed here instead of choices. And that's the thing that we're going to be looking into now. So, because basically, in the background, an image choice is the same as a choice. It's just that you don't press buttons, but you press, or I'd say you still press buttons, but they are more pictures on a picture, like markers on a map. So if you now press home, let's go home. So, in this case, let's create our image choice. For this reason, I have prepared some assets, which I will now import. So, first, let's add a new scene background. This one will also be our background for our map. I have all the assets I'm going to be using now. I have gotten for free online. For example, all the icons are from gameicons.net. And the map was a free map generator I found on itch.io. I will link to those in the description down below as well. So if you want to recreate the assets, you can go ahead and do so. So now let's import my map. It's just a simple basic random map. Let's set the texture group to UI, compression settings also to user interface, and save. The reason why we set it to UI is so we do not have any mip maps, because if we do have mip maps for textures used in UI, it would mean that they are blurry for a second before they are adjusted to the correct resolution, because Unreal Engine first has to choose the correct mip map to be displayed, which can take a second. In this case, we do not have any mip maps, so it will always be this size in this display. So let's save that. All right. Now let's rename this to town map. Then we also have our location markers. So let's add a separate folder to our art folder called town map. Or actually, let's call it map markers. And let's drop our markers in here. So we have one for work, one for coffee, one for college, one for home, one for shop, and a generic one. There we go. Now, one thing that we can do in Unreal Engine if we want to add multiple assets at once is we can select all, right-click, asset actions, and bulk edit via property matrix. And in here we can now set all of them to compression settings, user interface, and level of detail, the texture group to UI. And then it changes it for all at the same time. We press save, and we can close it again. Awesome, so now they are all perfectly set up already, and we can move on. Now it's time for us to create our widget. For this purpose, we go to content, blueprint UI, and we right click, and there's now two options. You can either create a widget through through going to user interface and widget blueprint and search for the base image widget, base image choice widget actually. This will just generate an empty widget. Alternatively, what you can do is you can also go to Visual Novel Machinery and select the Visual Novel Machinery in-game widget. This should have an image choice widget button. If it doesn't have the image choice widget button, it means you are using you are below version 1.71. The image choice widget button was added to this generator in version 1.71. So if you do not have this button yet, you will have to use the way I just showed before. And then we can click on this. And now it will ask us the container to use for our buttons. This is relevant for us because sometimes we want to use a horizontal box, so all the buttons will be spawned next to each other. But in our case, because we want to make a map, we want to use a canvas panel, because a canvas panel is perfect for perfect when you want to absolutely position widgets on the screen. So let's press that, and then let's call it town map widget. All right, let's open it. You can already see the image generator already gave us some layout. So we have a background and we have the choice buttons list that is required by the image choice widget. So now for the background, we want to have our town map. So let's go to background and search for town map and put it in. Let's save and compile. And now we want to place our buttons. But for this purpose, Visual Novel Machinery supports image choice buttons, which we also have to generate. So let's right click again, go to either user interface widget blueprint or Visual Novel Machinery and Visual Novel Machinery in-game widget, and let's select the image choice button. And let's call this one W town marker choice button. This will already give us a default layout. If you press this button at the top, it will automatically zoom it to fit your screen. And now we want to have a different image here. So let's do it. So what we can do is we now select this and select the position marker. Now obviously this is a little bit too big, but let's adjust it later. There's one more additional thing that we have to do, because there's now two options that we can do. Either we create a town marker choice button for each individual map marker that we could use, or we use the same base class and change the texture that we use for the marker. For this we have to do a little bit of blueprint scripting, but it's not too much to do. So what we do is we go to the graph and we find the pre-construct. The pre-construct event is called, obviously before construct, but it also is called in the editor, which means you will see the changes that you do to your widget already in the designer as well. In this case, we want to override the image that's displayed in the choice image. For this purpose, let's create a variable called marker texture. Actually, position marker texture. Let's change this variable type to a texture. So texture 2D is the type to use for textures. Let's save and compile. And let's find our position marker again. Next step is, we don't need those for now, so I delete them, is we find our choice image. So we got the getter, and then we call the function on our choice image called set brush from texture. We connect it, and we pull in the texture. There we go. Now let's also make this public, and we're good to go. So now let's move back to our town map widget. Let's find our town marker class. Awesome. Let's drag it in. And okay, let's do size to content. As you can see, this marker is too huge. It's just far too big. So let's quickly switch back to our town marker choice button and set the size to actually divided by 4 should be fine. You can actually write the equations directly into the number fields here as well. Makes life a little bit easier. Now, one important thing that you have to remember is if you change the size to something different than the original image has, then make sure that you do not have the match size boolean ticked, because otherwise it will overwrite it, and we don't want that. Now, if we go back to our choice button widget, we can now specify the position marker texture. In our case, we want to place the home texture. Also, one great thing with a canvas panel is that we can absolutely position it. So I can just take it and drag it around where I want it. So I say the home is in this skyscraper. Awesome. Now let's call this, just for convenience sake, let's call this the home marker. And now let's duplicate this. We also want let's check what we have for options. Home, cafe, shop, work, college. All right, so we need 4 more. So let's copy this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one will be the cafe, the coffee marker. Then we had shop, work, college. So shop marker, work marker, college marker. All right, now let's take this one. This one is the college marker. Then let's get the actual texture for it. And let's say college is here, the skyscraper. Then we have the work marker. So let's get the work texture. Work is conveniently placed over here because it feels like it's the perfect location for it. Then we have the shop marker. So let's add the shop marker. And let's say it's close by, so the shop is here. Actually, let's put it a little bit further away, so that the bounding boxes don't overlap. And then we have the cafe markers. So let's find the cafe. And the cafe is, let's put it into this skyscraper. All right. Now, next step, that we have our choice set up, we go back to scene 2 and we change our dialog choice to make it an image choice. Now we can also select the image choice widget class. This should be our creator class, so WTownMapWidget. Let's compile and save. And let's press play. So we press start. What is my name? His name is nothing. How old am I? 8. What's the name of town? K. Now, where should I go? We get the map, but we get one issue. The game, the visual novel machinery does not know which button is relevant. And it will only display buttons that are in the choice. And also only display buttons that actually have the choice text set. So what we have to do is we have to take the text tab we have here, go to the town map, and put the value in here as well. So this will be home. This will be cafe. This will be college. This will be shop. And this will be work. Now we press compile and save. We start again. Start game. Text is Tom. I don't know. He's 32 years old. And what is the name of the town he's living in? Towny Town. Good. Now, where should I go? And as you can now see, because we specified the name of the choice that we use in the choice node in the choice buttons, we can now click on it and he will say, let's go shopping, because we pressed on the shop. All right. Next thing that's happening is, because I wanted to show it to you, is let's delete college. So this option is deleted. And also one thing for you for debugging purposes, which would be nice, if you do not use any memories that would have been set before in another scene, is you can go to data, dialog definitions, and you can move this scene up. Because what the visual novel machinery will do, unless it's loading a save file, is it will start with the first row in your dialog definitions. So in this case, now that we have done that and we press start, we directly start in the map. And as you can see, because I removed the college option, it will now automatically hide that button. Which means, for you in the future, you can add as many markers as you need, but they will only be displayed if you add them to your choice node, or and their condition is determined to be true. If the condition is false, or you did not add them to the choice node, then they will not be displayed. And now we press home, and let's go home. Let's go home means we go back to the main menu. All right. And last but not least, let's open it up quickly again. It's kind of weird that we do not display anything here in the background, like a scene background, for example. Also, because when you press it, it also goes away immediately. For this purpose, visual novel machinery has scene backgrounds. So let's use that. So, as I mentioned before, I have the background that I've used here. I put it in the scene backgrounds folder because I also want to use it as a scene background. Now, how do you create a scene background? Let's go to DT scene background definitions. And as you can see, we already have one definition here, which we are just going to delete. And we're going to add a new one, and we call it town map. As with characters and dialogues and everything else in this plugin, the ID always has to be the same as the row name. Now, we also have a dialog image group ID, which is not relevant for scene backgrounds, but for CGs later down the line, for the gallery system, but more about that later. Also, we have a dialog image layer system for image layering, so you can add more layers on top of the image that you currently have, but we ignore that for now as well, because we will look into image layering in a future tutorial. For now, we just want to add the image. So we drop down the dialog image and select our image, which is the town map. Awesome. Now let's press save. We do not want to change this image size. We do not want to change the color and opacity, otherwise, unless you want to recolor the image. And we go back into, now we can go back into our scene. And the first thing that we want to do is, before even Bob is saying anything, we want to display our scene background. For this, we have our scene background show node. So we press this, and it spawns the scene background show node. As we have specified before that our scene background has the ID town map, we can now find this in the list below. Perfect. Now, if we press start, what will happen is it will immediately show the background. Now it will show the choice image widget in front of it, meaning behind this image is still the town map as well, and then we have the town map with the buttons. This is relevant for you if you, for example, display something that has transparency, meaning it will show what's behind it otherwise. So for example, down the line you want to have a table that has nothing on it, and when the player is selecting the location, you basically could write something like, and I put the map onto the table and then display the map, but the map is not actually on the background texture, but is in the image widget. Now we press our button on our home, and the buttons hide again because the whole image widget is hidden. Now we only see the scene background. And we press let's go home, and we're done. Now, something to try that you could try to do is maybe you do not want it to be displayed instantly. For this purpose, Visual Novel Machinery supports transitions. For example, we have a fade, a dissolve, a zoom, a punch, a vertical punch, a horizontal punch, something custom, and this thing we can ignore. So let's say we want to use fade, and we press compile. The other options that we have is the animation playback multiplier, which is basically you can use to have something displayed faster or slower. And then we have the don't wait for transition to finish Boolean flag, which we can ignore. So let's press start game. As you can see, the background faded in and then the dialog started. The difference, if we press don't wait for transition to finish, is that the text already starts while the scene background is still fading in. If you prefer this, then you can do it this way. Also, one thing that you have already seen now is that in general, at the end of the dialogue, everything that has been displayed will be deleted from the screen again. So if we're showing a scene background, then it will be hidden again in the end. Now, for example, what we can do is we can also hide a scene background. For this purpose, let's add a hide node. The reason why I'm putting it now here is because I want to show you something that I've explained before with the transparency. So we are hiding it before the choice is shown. Also, one important thing to note is there can always only be one scene background being displayed. So if you say scene background show again with a different ID, it will fade to the next scene background that you have selected. So therefore the scene background hide node does not have a scene background ID on the node because there can always only be one. Also, as with showing, when you hide something, you can also specify a transition again. So now let's press play, press start. You can see it's fading in. Where should I go? We switch over to this, and now it is gone because, as I mentioned before, the image choice widget is in front of the scene background, but we have hidden the scene background before we had the image choice widget. And after the image choice widget is done, it will hide itself and show what's behind it, but behind it is nothing, and therefore we have the void again. Alright, so let's remove this again. Let's clean up this blueprint. Alright, then let's save. And the last thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the main menu, we navigate to the dialogs folder, and we wait for the next video. In the next video, we will be looking into character images, because then we are reaching the point where we also want to display our very own character. We will be looking into image layering, and we will be looking into CGs and the gallery system. So that's everything from my side. Have a great evening, and goodbye.